Usually when we ask for a conversation or there's some wish in a situation of difficulty, someone says, well, at least they could talk to each other. Sometimes there's a sense that that's what you recommend when you want to try to avoid something being changed. I would like, however, to present conversation as a concept of and a means of social change. I think the lineage of this, as far as I can reconstruct, is it started with Gordon Pask, who was one of the people in the realm of cybernetics who, I think as long ago in the 50s, got interested in inventing machines. He made a color organ that would listen to music and produce colors. And he also got really curious about creating a machine that would help with learning. And in the way his mind worked, he took this as a provocation to try to make some fundamental statements about what is happening with learning and with teaching so that he could create a machine that would do it. And this led him to think about what is going on with what we talk about as conversation. And then Larry Richards, who has been one of the continual teachers of our school, coming in for a few visits each time, in his work in design, got fascinated with Gordon Pask's work with conversation. And in one of Larry's early papers in which he's questioning the rational planning model of design, proposes instead a dialogic model of design, in which what is happening is not a polite process, but a process as specified by Gordon Pask of, and the shortest way to put it is that there are parties in a conversation who have some wish to be in each other's company and have recurrent interactions, one requirement. And the second requirement is that they have some kind of asynchronicity, or not being on the same page, as Larry would put it, somehow in friction, such that in the course of their interactions, they eventually would arrive at synchronicity. From asynchronicity to synchronicity would be a process. And when synchronicity is reached, the conversation is over. Larry Richards' idea is that this vision of and concept of conversation is how change happens. And he has a somewhat longer way of breaking down what is going on here. And I became curious about this and decided to put his text into a painting. So hovering in the background of this painting here is this following paragraph from Larry Richards in a longer discourse on this idea of conversation as asynchronicity becoming synchronous. It starts off, conversation requires some commonality in the concept production processes of the participants. It also requires differences in the images or descriptions generated by these processes. Conversation occurs when conflicts between the images or descriptions of the participants present a situation that threatens the stability or coherence of the conceptualization processes. These conflicts can occur in the form of ambiguities, contradictions, or paradoxes. Resolution of the conflict involves an influx of variety, a moment of chaos, to use the currently popular vernacular. This variety is not communicated from one individual to another. It is internally generated by the individual. The role of the other in conversation is to present the situation of conflict and hence to serve as a catalyst for the creative process that ensues. Somewhere in there, in this cursive handwriting, is that. There's another text laid on top of that one, which really was the impetus for my wanting to put this into a painting. It was an email sent by one of the former students of our school. She had come from Toronto, was in Urbana for a while, and then went back to Toronto, and then she sent this email to everyone who is still in Urbana, School for Designing a Society. And it starts off, "Hey y'all, there was this horrible ad here in Toronto, and it was huge." She goes on to describe this advertisement. I think it was some kind of fashion advertisement that took up several city blocks and showed parts of women's bodies and a threatening looking man and a kind of a scary, violent picture. And the reaction, she describes her reaction to this in a prominent place of Toronto, and it made her feel so horrible that she would reroute her walk to avoid walking by this advertisement. And she tells a little bit more about how oppressive this advertisement was, and then, separated by some space in her email, it says, "But now the ad is gone!" Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And she describes how she saw that some group called Mad About Misogynist Ads, MAMA, I think is their acronym, had paint bombed this large advertisement. Paint in bags or some kind of objects, and were able to make paint on this advertisement. And so from this, she talks about how encouraged she felt by observing this action against this advertisement, which the advertisers then decided to take down. And she finishes the email by telling the women of Urbana and people who support them to attack advertisements that are oppressive with cheap markers and paint bombs, and such that anytime an advertiser wants to put up something, they would want to consult first with the women of Urbana, she says. And so this is this kind of stirring story, actually. And my question in creating this painting was, would it be possible to think of that interaction that she describes in this email as an instance of conversation in the way Larry Richards was talking about, in which there was a recurrent interaction in a way, or some kind of, in her story, of participants who were out of sync with each other, and there was an influx of variety and transformation in conceptualization processes that happened as a result. So this is kind of a conjecture on my part. And perhaps this is an illustration of what could be meant by conversation. Another thing that Larry Richards says about this is that the conversation model, or the dialogic design model, is one of thinking about social change not as a matter of causality, but as a matter of participation. So there's another understanding for someone saying, let's have a conversation. They're implying some transformation happening as a consequence.